Live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher joins us to really break down what's going on. Don't forget the Inside the Birds podcast drops Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 a.m. The latest version is out. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Football at 4 is also brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelyle.back.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Mike and Broads, watch the show live on Facebook.com, 973 ESPN. And, of course, there's a ton going on with the Philadelphia Eagles. So let's get into it, Moch. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful, fellas. How are you guys doing today?
It's been a wild day. It's been a wild week, and obviously the Eagles, they're not, Jeffrey Lurie said Monday that they were going to take their time and do all this. How long after they parted ways with Doug Peterson were you hearing that they were making a call to Lincoln Riley?
Probably within 2 to 3 hours they had made contact with Lincoln Riley. Although, in fairness, I'm going off of when the reports came out that Doug Peterson was fired. I don't know exactly what time of the day that Jeffrey Lurie fired Doug Peterson, but I know that not too far after, he did place a call to Lincoln Riley. I believe him and Howie Roseman had a conversation with Lincoln at that time.
So there is some relationship between Roseman and Riley, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously they spoke to Lincoln prior to the draft, drafted Jalen Hurts, who played there at Oklahoma for Lincoln. I'm of the it's my understanding they also talked to Lincoln about Jalen Reagor throughout the process too. I think Oklahoma plays TCU, if I'm not mistaken, same conference down there, so perhaps getting kind of a scouting report. So yeah, there's a relationship there. These people know each other. It's not like one phone call or something like that, or an introduction even. They know each other.
So is he a realistic candidate in your mind? I mean, they reach out to him and make a call. Does he seem like he's interested? Is it something that, they're going to interview him, or it's just, hey, they were, testing the waters there?
Yeah, this has been a tough one to nail down, and I feel like you see this a lot with college coaches because many of them do make that flirtation with the NFL simply go back to their college and get a raise out of it. So I don't know if that's what's going on with Lincoln at all. I mean, I know he talked with the Cowboys, I think at this time last year, when they were looking for a head coach. And I know some people close to him who said, he does have some interest in coaching in the NFL, and the Eagles' job at one time, was intriguing to him. Now, I don't know if it's different now because of Doug Peterson's firing and anything that's been coming out about, Jeffrey Lurie's involvement and Howie Roseman being there. I have no idea. I think what we'll find out pretty soon, though, just how interested the Eagles are. I believe if you go back to last year with the Cowboys, Lincoln publicly said that he was going to stay at Oklahoma. I don't think he's made, and I could be wrong, things change every second, I don't think he's made any public statement in the last 24 hours, either staying or leaving Oklahoma, which is interesting to me. It means to me maybe the door is still open because he has not publicly said anything. So I go back to the last time that Howie and Chip were really kind of keying in on a college coach was Chip Kelly, and they put a full press on Chip Kelly. So we'll see if Jeffrey and Howie maybe make a trip to Norman pretty soon, Oklahoma, to try to, regale Lincoln, or at least try to have another conversation with him to see if he's interested.
What are your thoughts on the amount of names being discussed? I feel like they're all over the place, from Mayo, a linebacker coach, to Joe Brady, who's young, to Todd Bowles, a veteran. Is this just them trying to hear everybody out, or, what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you heard Jeffrey Lurie say that he was in no rush, and it is typical of them to cast a fairly wide net. Go back to the last time they were looking for a head coach. I mean, we know Doug wasn't tops on the list. We know that Adam Gase and Ben Mack, and I'm sorry, not I'm going to go back to even the Chip Kelly flirtation. They talked to a lot of different people there. And even after Chip turned down, they wound up having discussions with, Bill O'Brien and Brian Kelly. And I think Todd Bowles might have been in the mix at that time. I forget. They're known for casting a wide net, which I think is a good thing. I think you obviously want to, do some research on some young and upcoming guys and get a feel for them just in case maybe you don't think they're ready now, but for down the road. And you want to give yourself as many options as possible. The only thing that's, I think, is the downside to this is, the report said they're going to interview Robert Saleh tonight. What if they are blown away by Robert Saleh? They're not going to just stop their process, I don't think, and hire the guy right on the spot. So they could risk losing him or someone else to any other team like the Jets or any team that had started this process before them, and then look back on it and say, man, I wish we could have had that guy because we were blown away, but we were going through this long list of candidates. I don't know that Jeffrey Lurie thinks that way, though.
So let's go through some of the possibilities. Joe Brady's name just came up today. 31, 1 year as an offensive coordinator, doesn't have a lot of experience. Thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are that it's kind of more of a smart offensive mind / leader of men type hire, and a lot of it comes from what he did at LSU the year before. I mean, certainly you look at the Carolina Panthers offense this year, and it's nothing to write home about. It wasn't great, so it really is less about his resume as a 1 year NFL assistant coach and probably more about how he was viewed before he took that Panthers job. And again, like the one thing that we can't ever know, right, because we're not there, is how these guys present themselves in the interview chair. I mean, and nobody else was really keen on Andy Reid that year that the Eagles hired him. So I don't know how he's going to come off in the interview with Jeffrey and Howie, and if he's going to knock their socks off or not.
How realistic is Deuce Staley? What do you think his pros are, and what do you think has stopped him from taking that next step in the past?
Well, I think he should be a very realistic and viable candidate because for a number of reasons. One, when you speak to people who have worked with him or underneath him as players, tremendous leader, tremendous coach, tremendous motivator, all the things that you look for in the head coach. Forget the X's and O's, forget that he's not, perhaps a play designer. You can get great coordinators for that. But when you look at just the great leaders in the game, Deuce Staley's name comes up time and time again. And so I think that he deserves the opportunity to be heard and probably be a head coach somewhere, if not the Eagles. Now, how realistic is it for the Eagles? They're going to interview him. I tend to think that if you just go back to last year alone, when they made changes in their coaching staff, it was Press Taylor that was kind of named the top offensive assistant to Doug Peterson as the passing game coordinator, right? I mean, Deuce is the assistant head coach. That's a great title. And he did take over for those days when Doug had the coronavirus, but Press was given more autonomy over the offense because he was the play designer. And, I have to think that in some ways reflects some kind of thinking in that organization that they wouldn't want Deuce in a role. Well, if they want an offensive-minded head coach, they probably want that guy to be this brilliant play designer. That's what I think the Eagles think. I don't know if that thinking has shifted, so I don't know that he's their first choice, but we also know that Doug Peterson wasn't, so we'll have to see what happens.
That's key. Robert Saleh is going to come in tonight for an interview, defensive coordinator. I feel like everybody left the Lurie press conference and felt that he wanted an offensive guy, but he kind of kept the door open for both, and he kind of indicated more than anything, he wanted a leader of men. And if that's the case, these defensive guys, Gerard Mayo, whose name came up today, which was kind of surprising, Robert Saleh, they would kind of fit that bill, as would Deuce Staley, correct?
Yeah, I would think so. And I do think Jeffrey, he's smart enough to not shortchange himself and only interview offensive candidates, right? I mean, he's smart enough to cast, again, the wide net, to want to speak to some of the great defensive minds and probably really get into who they would bring in as offensive coaches and then kind of dive into that. So it's good that he doesn't just restrict himself to offensive coaches, of course. But, if we were to play a game of futures bets, right, and will the next Eagles head coach be offensive or defensive, I'd probably put offensive minded at the minus 110 and defensive at the plus 230, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. That being said, Robert Saleh, does he, is he because everyone else is talking to him, or do you feel like he's a guy that they're high? Because you're going to have to move fast on him. That's why it seems to be a little weird here, right? The timing.
Yeah, I do think that it's good to do the interview. They're doing it. They're going to get their research done on Robert Saleh.
Like, in other words, Jeff, if they like him tonight, they're not going to pull the trigger on him tonight. But if they want him, they might have to.
Well, that was my point. What I was saying before is that they're going to do their diligence and not just hire a guy right on the spot. And because of that, they may lose a guy. They may get blown away by Robert Saleh, but they're probably going to do their diligence on everybody else. And in the process, they may wind up losing someone like that or someone else that really might endear themselves to them. I do think, let me
go ahead
on that. I'm just projecting here and in my analysis. I think part of Jeffrey's thinking and in hitting a home run on Andy Reid and obviously getting somebody in Doug Peterson who won a Super Bowl, I think Jeffrey's mindset is that it's not just going to be one guy in this process that blows me away. So even if I lose a guy who I was blown away by, there's going to be candidates out there who I really, really like as well. And he's going to lean back on the fact that, Andy Reid wasn't the first guy on his list and Doug wasn't the first guy on his list and Chip Kelly was, and that didn't work out very well. So I think if I'm projecting here and just trying to, without knowing exactly what's in Jeffrey's head, I would think that he's of the opinion that there's more than one really good candidate out there.
By the way, breaking news, the Brooklyn Nets have just acquired James Harden.
Wow.
So there you go.
Wow.
What's the compensation?
It just says Brooklyn is acquiring James Harden with a blockbuster deal. Sources tell ESPN. That's from Woj. No players have been announced yet.
Wow, how do I get back to Saleh from here? I mean, that's a big transition. My gut's all turning. I don't even know how to feel right now, but we're trying transition.
You guys want me to see myself out here?
No, absolutely not.
Let's
Moshe.
get Hudrick back on the line.
Moshe, hypothetically speaking, let's say Saleh is here, right? Do you think maybe bringing in Mike LaFleur, the passing game coordinator in San Francisco, and going with an offense that's more creative and maybe more the style Laurie wanted to go would be intriguing?
Certainly. I absolutely believe Jeffrey is – you heard him say it at the press conference, and he said it many times in the last few years. In order to win a Super Bowl, he feels you have to have an elite offense. So if he is going to hire a defensive-minded head coach, then that defensive-minded head coach probably has to blow Jeffrey away on the type of assistant he wants to bring in. Now, the 49ers have they were the Eagles before the Eagles, right? They had a run game coordinator and a pass game coordinator. One of those guys is Mike LaFleur. The other guy is Mike McDaniel, I believe, if I got that correctly. So both of them are pretty highly regarded. And I would think, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would think that, Rob would want to bring one of those guys with him, or he's got maybe different connections around the league that he might want to bring with him. But I would just think that Robert being under that Shanahan tree there would really want to kind of continue, to bring what Kyle Shanahan has brought to the San Francisco offense.
How much of this plays a role? Maybe I'm overthinking, but if you get a defensive coach as the head coach, the offensive coordinator might get picked from another team down the road pretty quickly compared to if that offensive guy is your head coach.
Wait, repeat that for me again?
Like if you have a defensive coach as your head coach, right? Like people will pluck your offensive coordinator away rather quickly compared to if you find your offensive guy as your head coach. Of course, he's going to stay there in Philly as long as everything succeeds.
Yeah, I would say that's possible. I mean, you got to think of it from this way. I mean, this is short-term thinking and all, but whatever offensive coordinator or offensive head coach, if it is, comes into the Eagles situation, it's going to be pretty difficult. We talked about this in the podcast today. Like, even if it's Mike Kafka, you got like an uncertain quarterback situation. You got a really bad cap situation for 1 year. I know you'll get some offensive linemen coming back, but making this offense kind of a top 5 offense overnight ain't going to be easy. So I'm not sure if anybody's going to be plucked in year one unless they really, hit everything on all cylinders, this offense.
By the way, you want the compensation for the Harden deal?
That would be nice.
All right. James Harden, it's a 3-way deal with Cleveland. Karis LeVert, Dante Exum, some guy named Karukis, 4 first-round picks, including the Cavs 2022 that came from the Bucks, and 4 Nets pick swaps go to the Rockets. Jarrett Allen, Turian Prince, they go to the Cavs.
Interesting.
And you didn't want to give up Tyrese Maxey, and you're stuck with a ball in your hand.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. I'm sure
you
you
go.
guys will debate that for quite a while. So does that mean like the next 7 NBA drafts are basically owned by the Thunder, the Rockets,
Yeah.
and who's the other team that has like 1 million first-round picks? It was I forget who it was. There was another team that had a bunch of them too.
Well, the Cavs just loaded up there. So, all right, football at 4.
there you go.
Geoff Mosher. Too much stuff to get into here, so let's continue the conversation because I want to get your take on Bieniemy and Kafka because obviously they're in the playoffs still, and the anticipation is they're going to be in the playoffs for a couple of more weeks. So how does that add or make it more difficult to make this decision?
Well, it might help the Eagles in that not nobody else is talking to either of those guys right now either. So that when they're finally ready to do more interviews, the Eagles can kind of be among the group. I know on our podcast, Adam Kaplan reported that the Eagles would put a slip in. I don't know if they've done it yet, but they're going to plan to put a slip in to interview Mike Kafka. So that'll be interesting. I don't know about Eric Bieniemy. Has anybody reported Eagles' interest in Bieniemy?
Nope.
Okay. I'll just say this. And there's only, the Eagles' job is 1 of 32. So I'll never say that, so-and-so is not going to accept it. But, people in Kansas City kind of are fully aware of what it's like here in Philadelphia because of the obvious connections with Andy and Doug Peterson. So I think that there will be some people in their ears about, beware of what you're getting into if you get a chance to interview. Now, does that scare them off enough to say, well, I'm not taking that job? I don't know. But if any organization is going to know what it's like to be an Eagles head coach, it's going to be people from Kansas City. And, of course, Mike Kafka was here as a backup quarterback, so he knows a lot of people who were up top.
Mm-hmm. Why Todd Bowles? Why is he getting interviewed?
Todd is not a guy that wins the press conference. And, for anybody who's listening who's a Jets fan, they probably are wondering the same thing you're asking. But when you talk to people around the league, guys who played for him, guys who coached with him, they think he's not only really smart, a great leader, but he's different inside that locker room than he is in front of the microphone. And he is a motivator, that he can get into his players. And by the way, he loves to blitz. This guy is usually top 5 every year that he's been a defensive coordinator in blitz percentage. So he's like the anti-Jim Schwartz. He's going to run a 3-4, and he's going to come at their quarterback. So if he were to be the head coach here and have some nice success with his personnel, I think he'd be an instant favorite among the fans, even if he isn't the most gregarious in front of the microphone. He's a Jersey guy, Elizabeth, New Jersey. He's got a little edge to him. I've seen him. He can get into his players when they're not doing it right. He's been here before, twice, I believe. So he kind of knows this organization well, and he knows what it's about. He knows what it's like to coach in blue-collar cities, having been the head coach of the Jets, too. And just, again, he's got a lot of those qualifications that you look for as far as being a good strategist, as far as his side of the ball with his defense, and a good leader of men.
How intriguing is the Bills' offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll? He had success with Josh Allen, which stands out to people who's trying to make that tie to fixing Carson Wentz.
I mean, if you're just going off the results alone from the last 2 years, you'd have to consider him to be one of those, Pat rising candidates. I mean, his agent is Bob Lamont, who also represents Doug Peterson and Andy Reid and a million other guys in that tree. So it's very likely that Brian Daboll will get a lot of interviews and get a job somewhere. And I think you have to give him credit. You watch the Bills' offense, and I know Josh Allen deserves a lot of credit too, but, how many times are they just picking apart the opposing defense over the last year or two, and especially this year? I mean, they've been very, very good, whether running the ball, running with the quarterback, passing the ball. They've clicked on all cylinders. So I think you got to give Daboll a real. I mean, I don't know anything about him as a leader, as a personality, anything of that nature. And that's obviously a big part of it. But just from his results as an offensive coordinator, seems like he deserves a pretty good chance to be heard.
Okay, another guy that they're going to interview is Arthur Smith, and I don't know that too many people in the listening audience have any clue who he is. He's the Tennessee offensive coordinator. I don't know that I have a lot of interest there. I mean, you got a workhorse back in Henry. There's a lot of play action down there. I don't know. Do you like Art Smith? Does he make a lot of sense for you?
See, now I thought you would like him, Mike, but even though he's run first so far with Derrick Henry, I know how big of a Tannehill fan you've become over the last 2 years, and I think you have to credit Arthur Smith for being able to do what Adam Gase and some guys before him could not do, and that's make Ryan Tannehill into a playoff caliber quarterback who can win some games for you. He's not just second fiddle all the time to the running game. Sometimes you have to throw it, air it out, and they've scored a lot of points this year. I don't think you hold it against somebody that they do the most with the personnel that they have, right? Meaning, yes, they are run first with Derrick Henry, but you also have to recognize that Tannehill's not necessarily a top 5 quarterback, and Derrick Henry is an absolute beast of a running back. So I don't fault him for relying on the run, nor do I think he can't be a good passing game coordinator or a head coach or preside over a good offense because he's running the ball right now with the personnel that he has. So, look at Kevin Stefanski. He was a run game guy in Minnesota, went to Cleveland, continued a run game guy, and look what the Cleveland Browns have done. And I have a feeling that offense will evolve as they get more time with Baker. So I don't know much about Arthur Smith's personality either. I know his dad is Fred Smith, who's like the CEO of FedEx, and I think a minority owner of Washington, right? And I think there's that controversy going on between him and Dan Snyder. But I think he's an impressive enough guy that you should interview and at least try to find out his thoughts on the passing game and just get into an overall philosophy.
There are some reports about Luke Fickle. What are your thoughts on his name?
That's kind of a wild one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know he was, head coach for 1 year, right, at Ohio State when Drew Trussell stepped down. He's known as being a very good defensive mind. Where is he, Cincinnati now?
Yes.
Right? And they had a great year. I mean, look, I like the fact that you look at guys in college and try to get into their mindset and their philosophy. I think that might be a difficult kind of jump for him to become an NFL coach all of a sudden because, it's just difficult in general to go from college to the NFL. There's not a ton of guys recently that have had a ton of success. But you don't want to shortchange yourself, so you might as well take a guy who has built a program there at Cincinnati and talk to him because we know that Jeffrey and Howie have a fondness for people who are considered program builders.
All right, Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast. They break this down a lot more. He and Adam Kaplan, so check that out. Wherever you get listen to your podcasts, they drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. And, of course, football at 4 with the guys right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. To check those in tomorrow. Kaplan's in on Friday. If something happens with the Eagles, football at 4 will have it. And Geoff Mosher, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Geoff, take care, pal.
All right, go back to your Harden talk, fellas.
We got new news on James
Yes,
Harden.
we
By the way,
do.
football at 4 is being brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelyle.back.com, 856-MAKEOVER.